Hi friends, it's Mrs. Bozarth. I hope you've been staying nice and warm inside, but have had some fun out in the snow too. Today we're going to talk about geometry, identifying angles, lines, line segments, rays, and points. We need to know the basics. And so lines, angles, and even polygons, they're the basics of geometry. So we're going to look at those because that's what's going to help us get started on the right track. Points, lines, rays, and line segments. When we look at a point, over here on the left, it says that a point represents a precise location on a plane. So a point is merely that little dot right there. Then we know a line. A line is a straight path that is endless in both directions. So when we classify a line, you'll see an arrow on both ends. That's a line. Then looking at a ray is a part of a line that starts at a point and is endless in the other direction. So we have a point, we go off in a direction, and we signify that with an arrow on the other end. Lastly, a line segment. A line segment is a part of a line that has two endpoints. So it takes up a definite space, has a start and an end, takes up a definite space, whereas the others kind of go on endlessly. So identifying lines, line segments, points, and rays. A point is normally identified using a letter. So for example, point C is what we would say. And we would do that just by simply putting the letter C. Now to classify lines, line segments, and rays, we're going to look at the parts of them, okay? So down here at the bottom, the example they give us is line EB. So there's points in this line, but we know because it's a line, it goes off in both directions endlessly. So we would classify that, identify that as line EB. Looking over here, we have line segment RL. Line segment RL has a definite endpoint, starts with the R and ends with the L. So it takes up its own little space. We classify that as segment RL. Then we have ray JK. So remember, a ray starts at a point and then goes off in an endless direction. And we would say, to identify that, that is ray JK. So we identify them by the points that run through or start at the end. Identifying lines, line segments, points, and rays. Sometimes these can be referred to with just letters and symbols. A point can be identified with just a letter like we talked about. But lines, line segments, and rays have symbols that go on top of the letters that look like this below. So a line segment RL, can look like the letters R and L with just the line above it, like so. So that's how you would identify that. And you would read that line segment RL, and we would be talking about this. Line EB, to signify or identify a line above the letters, the points, you would put a line. So again, lines have arrows on either end. Then for a ray, up above the ray, you would have a line with an arrow on one end. So that would be ray JK. Oops. Not too hard to identify those. Now let's start by classifying lines. We've talked about this before as well, but we can classify lines as either parallel, perpendicular, or intersecting. Look at these three examples, and before I go to the next page, see if you can figure out which is which. Parallel lines. Parallel lines are lines that lie on the same plane and never intersect. We've talked about parallel lines being like train tracks, right? Because we don't ever want that train track to cross over. That would be a problem. So these lines are the same distance apart between here and here all the time, same distance, and they're never going to intersect. So on this middle one here, if we were talking about that, we would say that line BH is parallel to line DE. And then we have some more parallel lines over here on the right. Again, same distance apart, never will intersect. Now let's talk about intersecting lines. Intersecting lines are lines that cross at a common point. So we have a line here. This line would be line SP is intersecting line FE. And they are intersecting at point Z. So these are intersecting lines, and they are intersecting at point Z. Next, we can talk about perpendicular lines. Perpendicular lines are also intersecting lines, but this time they cross and form a right angle. And we know that a right angle is a 90-degree angle. And you signify a right angle by putting that little red box there. You know that it's a right angle. So in this case, we would have line YE perpendicular to line PF, and they intersect at point T and form a right or 90-degree angle. That's why they're perpendicular. So what are angles? Angles are formed when two rays share the same start point. Remember, we said that a ray has a start point, and then in one direction it goes off endlessly. So this time we just have two rays that have that common starting point, right? This point where the rays meet is called the vertex. The vertex is that common point where they meet or start. Now, how do we name angles? We've talked about naming lines, line segments, and rays, but now let's name the angles. Angles can be named in three ways. By their vertex, we talked about that vertex is that middle point right there, or the 3 points in which the angle goes through in order. Okay, so that's kind of key, starting at either end. So here's some examples of the proper way that you can name angles. So looking at the angle they gave us, our vertex is point P. So we could name that angle, angle P, like it says first. We could also name it starting by its end points, the D, and then you move in to the vertex, P, and then up to the W. So we could also name that angle D, P, W. We could also start at the other point, point W, and go the other direction. So W to the vertex P, and then out to the D. So we could name that angle, angle WPD. Now over here, they've shown you what we do not want to do. On the left side, we cannot name these angles starting in the middle at the vertex. So we would not say this is angle PDW, or we would not go across and say that it's angle WDP. Okay, we always want to start at one of the ends and then we go through the middle. All right. Let's talk about classifying angles. We've talked about this a little bit, so here we go. I'm sure this will be a good review for you. We know that an acute angle, we say they're acute because they're cute and little, that's an angle that is less than 90 degrees, and we know that we call a 90-degree angle a right angle. So acute means less than 90. A right angle is an angle that measures 90. So it has to, and remember, you'll often see that little square there in the corner. Obtuse, those are the bigger ones. Those are angles that are more than 90 degrees. And then we can also have a straight angle. A straight angle is a straight line with a point in the middle, and that measures 180 degrees. So it's just laying flat. Acute, right, obtuse, and straight. So let's quickly review. Looking at what they've given us here, starting on the left, this first set of points would be what? We would classify that as line TR. So we would write TR and we put the arrows up above it. That would be line TR. We're going to classify this A down here as point A. Then we move over to the right where we see the B and the C, and that's what? That's a line segment. So we would put BC with just a straight line above it. Then to identify the last one, the J and the L, because it does have a starting point, but then goes off endlessly, that's a ray. So we would put a ray above it and write the letters JL. So that would be ray JL. Looking at these, let's see, have we got intersecting, perpendicular, parallel, what do we have? So let's find line BH and line DA. Those fall right here in the middle. And those are what? Those look like they're not going to intersect to me, so those are parallel. Then we have line SP and line FE. We can see those over here. And those are doing what? Those are intersecting. And lastly, they've got line YG and line CF. If we look at those, we can see that those are making a right angle, a 90-degree angle. So those would be perpendicular. Not the best handwriting there, sorry about that. All right. Now let's classify these angles. Do we have obtuse, acute, right? So looking at angle BZY, we can see that that angle is over here, and I can tell that that's greater than 90, so I would call that an obtuse angle. Then it asks me about angle QSC, and I can tell that that angle is forming a right 90-degree angle, so that would be a right angle. And our last one, angle RVT, that's smaller than 90 degrees, so that's acute. It's little and cute. All right, if you took a straight line and added another ray from the vertex to make two angles, what are the possible combinations? So let's see. It says take a straight angle, okay? Add another ray from the vertex. Here's my vertex. And let's just say I do that. What do we have? I know that I could make an acute. I could make one acute and one obtuse. Yeah, obtuse and acute. What about right and obtuse? If I made a right angle, if I had my line and I made a right angle, could I also be obtuse on this side? Nope. They're both would be right because that would be 90 plus 90. That's not an option. So if I had that same line and I laid it out there and I make an acute, this is acute. Could I have two acute? Could this ever be acute? Nope, that's not a possibility. But we did say we could make two right angles. What about two obtuse? If I have an obtuse like I created up here, there's no way that I can have another one, right? Because that's greater than 90. Not a possibility. And lastly, an obtuse and a right. In order for it to be obtuse, it has to be greater than 90. So therefore, I could not create a right angle either. Good job. All right, guys, I hope you've enjoyed reviewing this geometry lesson. I know that you guys have been working hard at home, and I'm so proud of you. I will see you hopefully very soon.